That's what
Okay.
I, that's
As I said, welcome.
and
Tim Borden.
as I said before we started, six years on Zoom now. I know what to look for.
Yeah, right.
Awesome. Thank you, Ken. Let me just pull up my presentation and just make sure that I've got the ability to share. It looks like I do. Yeah, okay, here we come. Oh, excuse me. It looks like I have to just change some settings on my computer so it will allow me. Remember what I was just saying about 6 years and learning how to do this? Um, okay, you should see
Yep. I see
my
it now.
screen and now you see the presentation, correct?
Yep.
Okay, great. Figured it out. Well, awesome. Once again, thanks, Ken. Thanks everybody for being here. As Ken said, my name is Tim Borden. I'm the New Mexico Community Support Director for Water Finance Exchange. I just started in this role earlier this year as Water Finance Exchange is expanding our role in New Mexico now, of all the places that we've been working. And so, just a brief overview of WFX. We are a 501(c)(3) NGO. We've got a national footprint, a growing national footprint by this point, but we are definitely focused on being community-based with most of our staff scattered among the communities that they work within. And so, like Ken said, I live in Gallup, New Mexico. I've been in New Mexico mostly since 2008, and I've been working in different community spaces in New Mexico. I have not lived in Gallup that whole time. I've lived in Albuquerque. I've lived in Colfax County. I've lived in Taos County, a couple different places. And so, yeah, happy to be with you here today. And so, yes, some quick, again, some overview about what WFX is. We were founded in 2020. Um, we are, our focus is water infrastructure solutions for underserved communities where multiple stakeholder needs have to be addressed, more complex situations. So communities that are having issues with drinking water, stormwater, gray water, wastewater, whatever the water system, uh, whatever the needs of our communities are, where there is um, some growing need for investment in these communities, but not a clear pathway forward on how to get that investment. That's kind of where we come into it. Since 2020, we've been working quite a bit in Texas, places like the Gulf South. We're now in Tennessee, Illinois, Wisconsin, Idaho, California, and like I said earlier, now in New Mexico. And we offer our services pro bono to communities. And so I think the best way to describe, we are a technical assistance provider, a TA provider. And the best way to describe what that means is we are the experts when you have an issue, specifically with financing for water projects, and you know what your issue is, and you know where you want to go, and then you go to type your question into Google, and you come up with all of these answers to questions that you didn't actually type into Google, and you just get so overwhelmed by all the responses that you get, and you need somebody to make sense of all the noise that something like Google creates. A technical assistance provider is somebody that comes in and makes sense of that noise. So rather than not having a clear pathway on how you get financing for these infrastructure projects, people like myself at Water Finance Exchange are able to come in and say, assess your situation, assess where you need to go, and give you a clear pathway or list the pathways that are available in order to get to where you need to go. So we've worked with over 200 communities by this point and have leveraged over $300 million of funding for various water infrastructure projects. This is some of our core philosophy: full community engagement. We want to engage communities through detailed conversations about their history, about their finances, their infrastructure needs, not isolated problems. Uh, we're not looking to come in and help communities solve just one issue. We're looking to come in and help communities who want to work through, who need to work through a multitude of really complex issues around their whole water infrastructure systems. That may be a multi-year process, but we're committed to being able to be there for that long haul and help communities work through those challenges. Mutual commitment. Our partners commit to the full engagement in the problem-solving process in exchange for our comprehensive support from WFX. And again, holistic, not piecemeal, not addressing one issue at a time, but building those relationships that connect governance, finance, and technical needs. And so, why are why is my, there we go. Wasn't clicking for me. So this is our service model on how we do that. And then we'll dive into some examples of how we've helped some communities throughout the country and what we've been able to help them accomplish. So these are our 4 steps in our service model on how we do that. And I'll just dive into them. So the first step that we take with communities is an initial review, right? A governance structure review. We look at who the stakeholders are. We look at, the regulatory relationships with the state, with their local communities, with whatever jurisdictions they might be overlapping in. Of course, this is different depending on where you are and what your needs are. Your assets and your needs assessment. We want to know what infrastructure conditions look like. We help communities work through that. There are sometimes we work with communities that have a really good idea about the condition of their infrastructure. And I had a conversation not too long ago with a community here in New Mexico who basically said, our system works. We don't know how, but it works. And we're afraid that at some point here soon, it's not going to work. And so we want to work on figuring out a pathway to keep it working. And so, like with that community, we're working with them on getting some funding to be able to make that kind of condition assessment to actually figure out where their pipes are, figure out the overall condition of their system because there's a lot of questions. So sometimes we help communities work through that. Um, Public health concerns, lead service lines, things like that. Those are pretty common that we see all over the place. I'm working with another community in New Mexico where we're working on replacing a whole bunch of PVC service lines that are a couple decades old by this point. So we help communities assess what their current conditions are. If they need further assessment on that, we help them get access to those resources to be able to do that assessment. Base document organization, getting financial statements, engineering reports, environmental assessments, all of these things are really important when you're trying to pursue funding for these water infrastructure projects. And sometimes communities have that organized and ready to go, and sometimes they don't. And again, we work with communities for where they are. If they need help getting some of that stuff organized, that's things that we can help them do. Um, Regional opportunity ID, explore shared services and consolidation with neighboring communities. Sometimes this idea of regionalization, and I've got some examples of where we've helped with that, works for some communities to be able to share resources and share funding and share capacity. And so that's one of the things that we might look at. Capacity assessment. identifying gaps in technical and financial expertise. And sometimes that includes just people. It's not just infrastructure, but capacity assessment also looks like uh, who's available on the ground to be able to help manage the system that's in place. Um, and then legal and compliance review, identifying violations and legal challenges that communities might have, and helping to navigate any issues that arise in this process. Because that's the first step that leads us to phase two, our financial assessment. So usually when communities come to WFX, they have some good idea about where they want to go with their water infrastructure. They have ideas about the kind of upgrades that systems need, the kind of investments that systems need. And so there's a target in mind. Um, and so at this point, we're trying to help them achieve whatever that target is, whether it's, $4 million for a new transmission line, or, $50,000 for some other lines here and there, or you're looking to build more supply, whatever it might be. Um, so at phase two is our financial assessment. We sit down and identify all of the grant funding and financing mechanisms that are available to the community. And this looks like every option that might be on the table. So this looks like helping communities investigate USDA funding, EPA funding, Bureau of Reclamation funding, other state and federal resources that might be available. It also looks like helping communities investigate other private sources of funding, low-cost loans, forgivable loans, things like that that may be available to communities that may be the right option depending on what it is that we're trying to accomplish. So we put all the funding opportunities that are available and right that may be the right pathway for the community out onto the table, and then walk through all the options and say, this one makes sense for this reason. This one might not make sense. Just talk through them all to see what might work. We also do data and GIS analysis support. This is a pretty big one. Communities always need a little extra capacity with GIS support, creating maps and data to inform these kinds of decisions, and then regulatory and funder communication being that helping liaison between communities and funding agencies. Because sometimes some of the communities that we work with may have just a very few amount of full-time employees, or even just part-time employees, or even not any employees at all, but just people that volunteer their time to be able to keep the system working on their own time. And so in those kinds of cases, we can help be that liaison between communities and funding agencies to help provide that kind of support to be able to secure funding. Phase three then is application management. So once we've helped communities identify the pathways that might be appropriate for them, make a selection, and then we help communities uh, do the application, manage that whole process. Again, we've got everything that we need from communities in the first couple of phases that you might need to put into an application. And then we help them go through that process of putting that together, getting it submitted, and then execution support. So working with them to provide the professional services to be able to execute applications, to be able to execute funding once it has come in the door. Or if funding has not come in the door, sometimes this happens where we apply for funding, especially with grant funding, not able to get it. That doesn't end our relationship with communities, but it's just this process, phase three, might repeat itself a couple of times as we work through a couple different avenues in order to secure what it is that we need to secure. And then
Tim, I forgot to ask you, do you entertain questions now or during the presentation or at the end? What do you prefer?
let's do at the end.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. And then phase four, our last phase, is post-application management, seeing communities through to lasting success. As I said earlier, WFX is not invested in helping communities answer or solve one isolated problem. We're more invested. Our approach is more about helping communities, navigate providing holistic support for community systems. So post-application management looks like helping wrap up any financing or grant work reporting requirements that need to get done. Um, it looks like documenting the things that need to be documenting, working with communities and stakeholders on reporting requirements. And then it also looks like going back to the drawing board afterwards to say, okay, what's the next step? What's the next thing that we need to pursue in order to make this system that we're talking about um, whole and functional and sustainable for the long haul? So it's a ongoing, long-term relationship and process that we intend to be involved with communities for. And so there's three communities I wanted to talk about. Some proven results from these places that we've helped just in the last couple of years. Our first one that we're going to look at is the United Regional Water Cooperative. So this is in central Illinois. And I spoke a little bit ago about, working to create cooperatives, working on driving regionalization where it makes sense. Here in central Illinois, it made sense. Six communities to regionalize their water systems and share resources across their water systems rather than six individual water systems. And this led to the construction of a shared treatment plant that served the cooperative, and it structured financing that combined grant and low interest USDA loan funding to do so. And we got $12.2 million for them, helped them secure $12.2 million to be able to do that, mostly or 45% of that through a grant, and then the remainder through low interest USDA loans. And so that's one example. Our next case is Hazelhurst, Mississippi. So Hazelhurst is, if you're not familiar with your Mississippi geography, it's just a little bit south of Jackson in southern Mississippi. And we helped them secure over $12 million in funding for non-compliant water systems. More than half of that funding was structured as forgivable loans, and it resolved a population data discrepancy, or we helped them resolve a population data discrepancy, which unlocked an additional $2 million in grants. And so, yeah, working with the city of Hazelhurst to be able to uh, get their system up to compliance where it hadn't been previously. And then the last big case study that I want to mention is about Presidio County in Texas. So Presidio County is in kind of southwestern Texas. This is like the Big Bend National Park area. Marfa is the big city that's out there. And so Presidio County is one of Texas's poorest counties, fewer than 7,000 residents, median household income of $25,000. And Marfa, over the last few years, has partnered with us and the Environmental Defense Fund to coordinate 9 entities across the county. So this is not quite full regionalization, but working with a cooperative to where we have 9 different water systems that weren't connected. Didn't really make sense to connect them physically, but it made sense to connect them um, through sharing for staff and time and resources and other things like that. And we help them create a steering committee and prioritize infrastructure projects with Presidio County and help them bring in $12.6 million through funding for some of these priority projects that were identified. And some of the regional context about Presidio County, diving deeper into this. Again, very remote place, very rural, not a very strong economic base of support for these communities. Um, Heavy aquifer dependency, and a growing demand, a projected 7% increase in water demand through 2040. Despite the population being what it is, there's still an expected population increase in this area. So further stressing the system and working on addressing needs with their water systems to be able to meet that growing demand. And so, yeah, a county-wide collaborative is what we came up with, is what we helped them come up with there, um, with a 5-year capital improvement timeline. And these are some of the 42 projects that we worked with them on. So replacing aging water mains, distributing lines across rural community or with distribution lines across rural communities, digging new wells and source upgrades to diversify supply, aquifer monitoring equipment to track usage and support the long-term sustainability. This is a community that drew from their aquifer but did not quite have adequate monitoring in place to know how that draw was impacting the aquifer. And then working with them on flood control and green infrastructure as well. So wetland restoration, rain catchment, flood mitigation across the county. This is a county that suffers some of the same, impacts that our New Mexico counties have. It's a very dry place. They're in a lot of drought conditions right now in the last couple of years. And then when it rains, it can rain and you can get 20% of your annual rainfall in 24 hours. And so flood control and green infrastructure was really important to this community for the long-term sustainability of their water systems. So yeah, $12.6 million for Presidio County. A couple more impacts that we had here. We had first ever home connections, drinking water into connections for the first time in some communities' history. Um, Industrial parks, municipal airports were included in those 42 funded projects. So a focus on supporting regional economic growth, the green infrastructure, like I mentioned, and the aquifer sustainability. So $12.6 million with an additional $16 million that's anticipated over the next couple of years, with a total possible impact of over $28 million in Presidio County. And this is something that WFX was able to step in, help create that steering group, help identify those priority projects, get all of the things in place in order to be able to pursue this funding, and then help Presidio County pull the trigger on being able to secure funding, get projects done, and continue looking for what the next priority projects for Presidio County are. And so there we are. There's a holistic path to sustainable water infrastructure. We've worked with a couple of communities here in New Mexico now. We've begun just in the last few months working with some communities. Um, and we're looking to provide more support now that I'm on board with our communities here in New Mexico to be able to do the same. And so that is, we'll open it up to questions, but that's my email, by the way, if you do want to reach out to me about anything, or this QR code will take you to our website. And so, yeah, we'll open it up to questions on anything that you might have.
Great. Thanks, Tim. Very inspiring. Uh, Ann Simon with the city of Albuquerque asks, what's the profile of the average community you work with?
There's not one profile. We don't have limitations on how small of a community we'll work with. We don't have limitations on how big of a community we'll work with. Um, I think our focus is definitely on need. We tend to focus on more underserved communities, but there's not a hard line for what that means. And so I encourage you, if you think that you may fit the bill of what that might mean, to reach out and we can have that conversation. But I know I've talked to one community here in New Mexico with a water system that serves 11 households, and that's not too small for us. We're very willing and open to helping somebody that small, and there are some. I can't think of what the largest cities that we've worked with are, but there are definitely a lot of mid-sized cities across the country that we've helped with at this point.
Of course, a city of any size can identify a neighborhood that really needs work that's
Absolutely.
having to be in the city limits. All right, Andrew Harnden with the Seneca County asks, have you done any work with mutual domestic water consumer associations in New Mexico?
Not yet. We're in the process of partnering. We're in the process of reaching out, creating those connections, and not yet is the answer. But it's on the horizon.
And where are the two sites in New Mexico that you have worked with or are working with?
So the first site, there's a couple that we're talking to or the very early stages on, but the two that I mentioned, the one that has 11 houses is in Montezuma, New Mexico. So it's actually part of the United World College in Montezuma.
Oh, yeah.
So the college itself there has a water system that has their own water system that also supplies 11 houses in the community. So that's the small water system.
But they have hot springs, so
Yeah. Um, yeah, they do. Cool place up there.
yeah.
And then the one I was talking about where we're having conversations about replacing PVC transmission lines is in Dottle in Catron County. And so that's also not a very big system. That I think is maybe 50 or 60 users on that system. And that's one of those systems where I'm talking about where there aren't any employees. There's just a board and people who volunteer their own time to serve on that board and to keep the water system running. And and then the other place I mentioned, one of the pueblos is the system that I mentioned where a we've got infrastructure where they know the system works, but they're not quite sure how, and they're not quite sure where their transmission lines run. But again, the system works, and they want to make sure that it keeps working.
One of those out of sight, out of mind things.
Yeah,
Um,
that's right. Yeah, it's one of those things where you don't, most of the time I feel like a lot of communities are not working to address those issues until something breaks. And thankfully, we do have some communities here in New Mexico that are recognizing that the system is going to break eventually at some point once it gets old enough, and they're trying to get ahead of it.
right. That's important. Kristen, before I call on you, let me read a question for Becky Smith. New Mexico is having a water infrastructure workforce shortage. Is WFX involved with helping communities with workforce to keep water systems sustainable?
That's one of the things that we can help communities with. So, to us, infrastructure is not just about transmission lines and pumps and reservoirs, but infrastructure also looks like people. And so, a couple of the other projects that we've helped communities with um, in other different places have been communities have looked to WFX to be able to provide financing for either hiring new critical employees that were necessary, but they didn't have the existing funding to be able to hire as it currently stood. So we've helped people access funding to hire critical employees. We've also helped communities access funding to be able to provide training, critical training for existing employees to help either get them the kind of knowledge and experience that they need in order to help operate their systems, or if you've got employees that you want to invest in, provide more training, give them pathways to stay with the resource. Um, we've worked with communities to secure funding to be able to send people out for training to be able to come back and they can have that much of a more critical impact on their water system. So that is something that we can help communities with too. Infrastructure is very much people as well as physical infrastructure.
Great. Okay. Thank you. Christian, you have a question?
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Tim, for the presentation. I'm curious. We have a couple somebody from Taos County on the call. Certainly this kind of smaller rural work you do seems potentially relevant uh, for Taos County. Then we also have a couple folks from City of Albuquerque on the call, and wondering, this is a question for both you and for Ann Simon and Councilor Feeblecorn, wondering, is there overlap between the work that WFX does and the potential needs for a large urban center like the city of Albuquerque?
I think there certainly is. I think we are equipped to help rural communities out more. And this is that holistic piece of what I'm talking about, right? Like if communities need help passing an audit, for example, because passing an audit, that's pretty critical in order to be able to access grant funding or other financial resources. If a community needs help doing that, we're equipped with resources to be able to provide that kind of support. I mentioned GIS support, having abilities to help communities map their systems, assess data related to their systems. So there's all these other things that go into what we can offer communities. Um, More rural communities are definitely more in need of those types of offerings, to where the city of Albuquerque, um, you know, Santa Fe, Las Cruces, these larger cities certainly have a need to access funding for infrastructure projects, um, but may not have as much of a need for all that extra support that we're equipped to be able to offer, which doesn't mean that we can't help them out. They just may not need as much of the service as what we can offer. Or there's other TA providers in the state of New Mexico that do very similar work to what WFX does. And one of the things that we're committed to doing is, working among that network of New Mexico technical assistance providers, to where if somebody comes to me and says, this is my situation, this is my scenario, what I need, I may say, hey, this is, maybe not the best. WFX may not be the best place to help you get what you need, but this other technical assistance provider, this is more in line with what they can do. Let's connect you here, and trying to figure out, okay, if we're not the right spot for you, let's figure out who is, because we want people to get that support, whether or not you're United World College with 11 houses or you're the city of Albuquerque.
This actually anticipates the next question. I'm sorry, Kristen, you finished?
No, no, that was great. Thank you, Tim.
Okay, thank you. Engineer Price from Taos County's asked if you coordinate or collaborate with the Rural Community Assistance Corporation. So it sounds like you do that, but I just want to confirm.
With Ramon, yeah. Yes, we have collaborated and communicated with Ramon. I served on a panel with him a couple of weeks ago in Santa Fe about about technical assistance for water finance. And we are working with Ramon and the RCAC in the foreseeable future, about working on building a stronger connection between our work and their work, and being able to support each other.
So you really have raised a lot of money or helped places get raised money. It seems like a lot of it's federal sources. Is that correct? And aren't you worried about whether that's going to continue to be a possible avenue, or at least at the levels of financing that have been granted from USDA and other federal agencies?
I don't think I mean, I think the answer is yes. I'm certainly, you know, I'm certain there's reason to be worried and cautious, I think, is probably the better approach about it. Um, but this hasn't been the case so far. There hasn't, there's still been a fair amount of funding from the federal level that has still been available for these types of water infrastructure projects. So this is one of those types of programs where there's definitely been changes. There's definitely been changes to programs, but funding sources have not gone away completely.
Okay,
Um,
well, it's good to hear.
there's that. And then the other thing about WFX that makes us a little bit different from other technical assistance providers in New Mexico is our ability to access uh, private funds as well. So whether that's private philanthropy, grants and financing, or if it's other sources of private financing that is low interest. There's non-grant opportunities that are out there as well that we are also able to help communities access if grant funding is not available or if grant funding doesn't make sense, or if you need some kind of combination of grant funding and other financing. So we also have a pretty robust program about helping communities access that type of financing as well.
There's a new law in New Mexico that requires any private nonprofit uh, to get on the public list of the infrastructure capital improvement program. Can you help communities get on the list of a municipality or county?
Yep, those are kinds of the things that we specialize in with our small communities.
Great.
Those are things that we can help people with.
That's good to hear. We also have a new source of funding in New Mexico, the Climate Investment Exchange. I'm sorry, Climate Investment Committee. That's a group that can raise money. Low interest loans is their specialty, especially for low income communities and others who really have to struggle to pay the bills. Any other questions for Tim? If you could stop sharing and then we'll wrap it up, that would be great. I really appreciate your time, Tim, and again, it's really inspiring to hear what you're doing. We'll post we'll post this on the our coalition website, and hopefully others can take advantage of it as they will.
Yeah, thanks, Ken. I appreciate anybody if you think that WFX may possibly be a avenue for you to be able to access funding that you need for your systems, please reach out to me. And again, we're committed. If we're not the right ones, we're committed to helping you figure out who might be the right TA provider in New Mexico to help your community in the way that you need. So if you think that there's a possibility, go ahead and reach out. We can have the conversation and we'll do what we can to be able to either support you or get you to somebody who can. So if that's appropriate for you and the community that you're in, please do that. But also, if you hear about communities across the state who aren't here part of this conversation today, direct them to this recording, direct them to me, and we're open to being able to help anybody.
Great, really. This is the kind of area you can't have enough help in, that's for sure.
Sure.
All right, Tim, thank you, and thanks everybody for joining in.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.